Good morning. For folks on the phone, we're going to wait another couple minutes. If you are one of the invited representatives on the phone, if you can please either text me or email me that you are on the phone and your phone number as well, so I can give that to our staff. Thanks. Okay, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Clean State Strategy Subcommittee meeting to order. Subcommittee of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. We are today from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. on today, November 8th. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. We have Assembly members, myself, Felix Rivera, and then Mr. Martinez. Are you on the phone?
I am. Thank you, sir.
Great, thanks. And then let's go ahead and do introductions of invited representatives.
Hi, Ken McCarty from Eagle River, Chugiak, District 2.
Thanks. And then we have a couple representatives on the phone. We're starting with you, Sky Nevada.
Hi, Sky Nevada with the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce.
Great, thanks. And then Chelsea Wardwaller.
Good morning, Chelsea Wardwaller from the Town Green Council. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If we do have any other invited representatives on the phone, please either text me or email me that you are on the phone. That way I can get your phone number, and with your phone number, please, so I can get you connected to staff. All right, so we only have one topic on our agenda today, which is coming to alignment on the location selection process from here to January 3rd, which is when we will be making our final recommendations. I'm going to lay out my thoughts on a process and then have other folks weigh in. If we are quick and efficient today, this could be a really quick meeting, which is totally fine by me. We don't have to belabor this today. Any questions or thoughts before we dive in and I walk us through my thoughts on the selection process? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So the question in the location, and I was trying to look for a map of different buildings that the Muni already has. We had the discussion at the last meeting of it was kind of ruling out buildings, but if we could have that, as well as any of the buildings that if they fit all the other criterias, but a zoning one, the feasibility of looking at changing the zoning so it fits that criteria as well. Again, busing or other type of things that fit, but that doesn't fit regarding the zoning thing. And then the second piece of data collection, since we are unique as a state, as an area of the world, what are we doing in data collection in regards to other cities throughout the world as we look at cities within the United States, what's happening elsewhere? And I just had the experience of my daughter doing work in Cambodia, spent the weekend in Singapore, and made a comment that there's no homeless individuals in Singapore. It's a very clean city. I'm not saying let's follow Singapore's example, just what are the examples of other cities throughout the world regarding homelessness? Thanks.
Great, thank you. I need to get a number to staff really quick, and then I'll come back and address that. Just want to note for the record that we have Yarrow Silvers on the phone, and Yarrow is driving, so I'll just introduce you, Yarrow. She is the representative for East Anchorage. Okay, so on your first point, the way that the criteria were built, they were done in two ways. One criteria was a must-have criteria, and the second set of criteria were a good-to-have criteria. The second set of criteria dealt with public transportation, I believe. Yeah. So that was the good-to-have criteria. So if there is a particular location that maybe isn't close to public transportation, then it wouldn't knock it out of the running necessarily. That would just it would just mean it doesn't meet that particular criteria in the good to have category. In the must have category, there were really two different ways that it looked at zoning. And so in the must have criteria, there were really two ways that it looked at zoning. One of them was that the property must be zoned POI or B3, and that's in our code, right? We can only have an overnight shelter in those two zones, POI or B3, or the second criteria, and again, this is also a must-have for the way that it looked at zoning, is that the property or properties must have the written support from the Anchorage Health Department director to trigger Title 16 emergency shelter provisions while the property or properties are rezoned. So Title 16 does allow the Anchorage Health Department director to essentially waive the zoning requirements. And for example, we have one long-standing shelter downtown which has years-long Title 16 waiver. So it's not unheard of for us to use that Title 16 process. And then on your second question on data collection and comparison with other jurisdictions or really other international locations, I will have to ask the coalition, as they would be the ones that really would best be able to respond to that. The coalition representative is running a little bit late, but I will let her know, and maybe she'll be able to get some information to us soon. All right, so then let's go ahead and dive into it, not seeing anything else. And for folks on the phone, if you just want to text me if you want to get in the queue, that's the easiest way for you to get in the queue. Okay, so diving into the selection process. So I've outlined a few different steps for us to get to a final decision and recommendation on January 3rd. So step one is very similar to what happened in 2021, which is to put out an RFI, a request for information for possible locations. The facilitated collaborative process did this in 2021, and they actually got some decent responses from it. So I think it is worth doing it again to see if there are locations which aren't on any list right now that may work for a possible overnight shelter. I don't think it would take too long to put an RFI together because we've done it in the past. So it would hopefully largely be just a copy and paste and edit exercise. But that's something that I'd be happy to work with. Likely it would be the health department that would put out an RFI, or possibly real estate, not exactly sure. I'd work with the administration to figure that out. Step 2 is to complete the analysis of the locations on both the GIS map, which is the map that I emailed out to everyone, or the clerk emailed out to assembly members, and the old location list. So I'll share that list with everyone this week, but the old location list are the list that was developed during the facilitated collaborative process in 2021 and 2022. So take a look at both those lists, so the GIS map locations and the old location list, and then remove those locations which do not meet the obvious criteria. I mean, I'll outline what that is in a second, but just for folks as a reminder, the criteria that are on the GIS map, there is 3 criteria that are on the GIS map. One of them is a must-have, 2 of them are good to have. So the must-have one was the PLI or B3 zoned. So that was on the map. The other two that were on the map were good to haves, and that was property or properties should not lie within 500 feet of a school, licensed childcare facility, or playground. And then the third one that's on the GIS map is the property or properties should lie within a quarter mile of public transportation, a bus route. So those are what's mapped. The ones that are not mapped are things like the Title 16 waiver. You really can't map whether a location will be used with the Title 16 waiver. Another one that isn't mapped is for every individual, there must be 50 square feet of space for each sheltered individual's personal use at a minimum, plus additional space for administration and services. That isn't mapped. Another one that isn't mapped is if an existing building, the property or properties must be unoccupied and available and be in fair condition or better as determined in writing by building safety. That one isn't mapped. And then the property or properties must be ADA compliant or easily brought up to compliance. That one isn't mapped either. And then the last one that isn't mapped is the capital costs required to acquire the site and bring it to habitable condition must be within the available budget, and capital budget must be presented to the assembly for consideration. In addition, startup costs and first quarter of operating costs must be factored at $2.5 million during site selection. So those all that I just listed that aren't mapped are in the must-haves. And then the good to have that isn't mapped is the property or properties should have the ability to create a visibility buffer. So going back to what I stated earlier, the obvious criteria, those I see as the 2 following ones. For the 50 square foot for each individual, for personal use at a minimum, plus additional space for administration and services. I think for my part, I think what it makes most sense to do is at the smallest, go to a 50-person shelter. So if there's any spaces that are on the map that would not accommodate at least 50 individuals per the calculation of 50 square foot per person plus administration and services, then that would be cut off the list. And then the second criteria is if an existing building, the property or properties must be unoccupied and available and be in fair condition or better as determined in writing by building safety. I think that is also a second one, at least the available for sale and unoccupied. I think those are ones that would be easily determined. I think the in fair condition or better would probably take a little bit longer to get that kind of determination by building safety, but at least knowing which ones are for sale and the ones that aren't for sale, we could also take those off the list. And my sense is that we would be able to take a good chunk of properties off the list, both from the GIS map and the 2021/2022 facilitated process list, because a lot of those properties have since then sold. So those are the 2 criteria that would be reviewed, and then we'd take off lists based on those 2 criteria. Take off locations based off those 2 criteria. Step 3 would be for a group of 3 folks to do a deep dive into these locations. And the reason it's 3 is to avoid implications of the Open Meetings Act and to more efficiently and productively for us to be able to do this work without having to worry about notice every little thing that we do. So a group of 3 to do a deep dive into these locations and to ensure that all the criteria can be met, and then to rank the properties based on criteria. And then step 4 is that ranked list will be reviewed by this group during the meeting or meetings the week of November 27th. As I've said previously, November 27th is when we don't have any meetings on the books yet, but I am hoping to get meetings on the book during the week of November 27th for us to go through this process. So we'll have that ranked list for meeting or meetings the week of the 27th, with a goal to get the list down to a short list of 10 locations. And those short list of 10 locations will be given to the community at the town halls that are happening in early December. So we conduct those town halls with those short list of locations and get feedback from the community. And that's step 5. Step 6 is once we get that feedback, I will prepare draft recommendations based off of the criteria, based off of the ranked list, based off of the feedback and everything that we've done so far, as a starting point for the committee to consider at the January 3rd meeting, where we will be making our final recommendations. And I'll share those out with the assembly and the invited representatives via email in advance. And I will encourage folks to come prepared at the January 3rd meeting with your own alternative recommendations, if that's what you desire, or amendments to the draft recommendations that I put forward. And then we can hash things out at the January 3rd meeting and get to final recommendations, which is the final step, step 7, vote on January 3rd on the recommendations at January 3rd meeting, and then hand off those recommendations to the assembly. And at that point, the locations work for this group will be done, and it will be in the hands of the assembly and the administration to move things forward from there. So that's the process. Just quick recap. RFI for possible locations. Take some locations off the list that don't meet some of the obvious criteria, like 50 square foot per person, like the property needs to be for sale. Then a group of 3 will do a deep dive into the locations and rank the properties. Then pause. Want to note for the record that Mr. Solt has joined us on the phone. Welcome, Mr. Solt. Then after the group of 3 ranks the properties, that will be presented to this group the week of November 27th. Then this group will take those properties and then narrow that list down to 10 possible locations. Those 10 locations will be presented at town halls in early December to get feedback. And then final draft recommendations will be debated and voted on at the January 3rd meeting. That's it. Fairly straightforward. Probably will be a bit intensive process. Happy to get feedback from folks. Again, for folks on the phone, because most of us are on the phone. If you want to text me to get in the queue, that would be great. Otherwise, yeah, happy to have discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. The RFI that you brought up earlier, since we are looking at 19 days before this meeting to look at the breakdown and for those group of 3 to wind it down or narrow it down. So since this is a public meeting and maybe there's people out there that might be sending in, yes, I'm interested in the facility, who would they contact? Because an RFI hasn't been put together yet, or the format, who would they contact to let us know that they're interested?
Yeah, so if folks are interested, I would suggest that they could, probably easiest point of contact would be me right now. And then once the RFI is submitted, I can let them know, or is public, I can let them know, hey, the RFI is public and you can officially now submit your location. But as I stated earlier, we've done an RFA on this exact process in the past, so I would hope that it wouldn't take long to get an RFI out in the field. Welcome. I want to note for the record that Ms. Silvers has joined us in person. All right. Any other feedback that folks want to give? Again, this meeting is really all just about getting alignment on the process so that at the end of the day, everyone has a process that they agreed on, can be fair, and then we can move forward with it. Yes, go ahead.
Through the chair, so I have quite a few people ask me the question. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer or know that, so maybe you could illuminate that. Is what's the deal on the mall that's down in Mountain View that's not doing anything right now? Northway Mall.
Yeah, thanks. Good question on Northway Mall. So that is something that has been discussed and reviewed by multiple administrations, going back to the Berkowitz administration. And essentially, every administration has stated that the Northway Mall wouldn't work for a variety of reasons. The biggest reason being the cost of repair and remodeling is the biggest reason why it would not work. And I think we got a sense of that when part of the roof collapsed last winter. And as I understand it, well, I guess a couple things. One, as I understand it, the owner of the property put the property for sale as a demolish and rebuild, whatever the technical term is. And then two is also, as I understand it, there is someone who is looking at purchasing that building and is in negotiations for that. So my sense is that that building will no longer be on the market relatively soon. All right. So if we don't get any feedback, what I will do is I will just email this out to folks because we do have some folks who aren't here, and then invite folks to provide me any feedback that you may have via email. But otherwise, what I'm going to do, possibly even starting later today, is reach out to the administration on the RFI so that we can get something out quickly, and then just going to move forward as planned by these steps. All right. Like I said, this could be quick and efficient. Yes.
Thank you, through the chair. So you brought up a point of steps, and one of them is step 2, property is unoccupied and is available for sale. What about a building that's for lease?
Yeah, thanks. So we can look at buildings for lease. I think, yeah, I suppose I'm not opposed to that idea of looking at buildings for lease. I think primarily this group's train of thought has been in buildings for sale. By and large, when we approach a building owner and say, hey, we want to lease this building. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Sure. You're the government. You're good for your money. Okay, what do you want to lease it for? Oh, for a shelter. Oh, never mind. I'm not interested in leasing this building to you. That is the general response that we get from folks who are interested in leasing. It doesn't mean that we can't explore it. Okay, Ms. Wardwalla, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I have a few questions. I'm sorry for not jumping in sooner. I was just letting you finish the whole overview. Thank you for that. I agree with the process. It sounds good, I guess. My couple of questions are, are existing municipal buildings going to continue to be on the table through this process, given sort of the use of the solid waste administration building this year? As an example, would that building specifically continue to be on the list? And then I apologize if I missed it. I wasn't able to catch all of the last meeting and maybe also just missed it. Otherwise, do we already have a budget for what a building could cost? Like, does the assembly already have a designated amount, or would that be part of the follow-up conversation after we have buildings identified?
Yeah, thanks for your question. So specific to municipal properties, the only property, as I understand it, that could possibly use for shelter is the currently not unoccupied anymore, formerly unoccupied SWS administration building, former SWS administration building. That is being used, as everyone knows, as an emergency cold weather shelter. SWS does have some plans and designs for that building in the coming years. So what they have told the administration, and we really haven't had any real discussions on this, but what SWS has told the administration is that they would be willing to potentially lease that building for a maximum of 2 additional years. So I would imagine through 2025 for usage as shelter. But after that, SWS does have plans, and they are going to be moving forward with their plans for that building. As I understand it, no other municipal owned buildings are on the list. They all have their respective functions, and we're not looking, for example, at turning the Sullivan Arena on as a shelter again, or turning the Spenard or Fairview Recreation Centers on as shelter. That is not something that this group or the Assembly is interested in by and large. Your second question on budget. So the budget for this, in the end, will have to be determined by the Assembly and the administration of finding out where those funds are going to come from, whether that's bonds, whether that's fund balance in future years, whatever that may look like. That is a discussion that I think the Assembly will handle after the recommendations have been completed. I know that Assembly members are committed to getting this done, and my hope is that that commitment also means we got to be committed to finding the funds for this. And my sense is that in April, we will likely be having a lot of those discussions of finding the funds when we get to the first quarter budget revision process.
Thank you. And if I may just briefly, I would, and maybe the door is closed on this, and that's totally fine, but I would recommend that we keep the buildings, even if they aren't unoccupied, on the radar, just since this solid waste administration building, at least from my perspective, came a little bit out of nowhere. We never know what other opportunities like that could exist, or swaps or something like that could happen. There have been a lot of changes in plans around the municipality in recent years. And so, I would just encourage us to maybe not close that door unless that door has already been fully closed, which is also fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. Certainly, if a goose lays a golden egg and we have an opportunity that's seems extraordinary and would be silly for us not to take advantage of, I think the process has enough flexibility for us to do that. But yeah, and if that happens, and who knows if it will, then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I appreciate that. All right. Then if I'm not hearing anything else. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I may have missed this, but what's the process for putting buildings on the list that may not be from the RFI or already on the list? So like, who's going to go out and look for buildings that are for sale, and how are those going to be put on the list?
Yeah, thanks. So my assumption, maybe this is an incorrect assumption, is that when we put out the RFI, that will notify individuals who are looking at selling their buildings to submit to the RFI. And then in that case, we will get any new properties or additional properties that maybe aren't on our radar already. The RFI will allow us to add those to the list. In 2021, when an RFI went out, it did that function. It served that function of adding new properties to the list. So I would hope it would be repetitive in that way.
I think there needs to be a way to maybe reach out to property owners that have things for sale that maybe not know that the RFI is out, or.
Yeah, thanks. No, I'm sure there are perhaps some real estate organizations that we could reach out to personally and just let them know that this is an opportunity. I can work with the administration on that. All right. Okay, so then I know I'm just waiting to see if anyone else has something to say, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Oliva. Don't you worry. I see you. Okay, just going to pause for a second. Last opportunity. All right, hearing and seeing none, then I'll go ahead and close that discussion. Thanks, everyone. Easy, simple. We'll get through this process and we'll get to our final recommendations. Can't say it will be easy at the end, but we'll get it done. All right, so then moving on to audience participation. I know we have one eager participant in the room. If you just wait, Mr. Oliva, we will. There we go. Thank you. All right. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Ronald Leva, adjacent property owner at Brother Francis Shelter. I consider myself a professional on the homeless issues. And as a point of order, Felix, you said if you were invited, the public's invited from the notice that was sent out. So I don't know how I can ask questions prior to the 3 minutes of my public participation. If these individuals sit at a side table, they were invited. I was invited also, so I should be entitled to ask questions during the meeting. Can you clarify that?
I am happy to clarify. Can we go ahead and pause this time? All right. Since you're the only one here to testify, I will go ahead and clarify this. I will note this is not something that I'm going to do normally, Mr. Oliva. Okay. So this was something that I explained fairly early on in the process, so several months ago, like in May. But the invited representatives are invited here and selected by their respective community councils. So as an example, Yarrow is the chosen representative for all of the East Anchorage community councils. They all got together, whether that was via email, in person, however they did it, and they chose Yarrow as their representative. Same thing for Mr. McCarty as the Eagle River Chuyak representative. So in addition, we also had three invited representatives, one from business, one from real estate, and one from the coalition to round out the other community councils. So the 6 community councils plus those 3 invited representatives. Those are all folks who are invited to participate as equal partners in the discussion. As you know, committee meetings are business meetings, and so the folks around the table are the ones who participate in the discussion, and then folks in the audience have a ability to participate in the discussion at the end of the meeting. And the invited representatives also will have voting power when we take votes, and we saw that when we made the criteria. Invited representatives vote. We're going to see that when we vote on January 3rd. Invited representatives also have their vote. So hopefully that explained that. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Felix. You said you don't normally do this. Most things you do aren't normal, Felix. So you're consistent. Can I regain my time on the question? Oh, okay. Felix, as you know, I've been here multiple times, and I referenced the Love Canal. When you understand the Love Canal, they polluted, and they eliminated the polluter, but they didn't eliminate the pollution. When you bait a beta camp, such as the old Native Hospital site or Carlick Street, you have to understand the damage was done to nearby property owners. And whether you put homeless in a hotel and they do damage, you pay it. So reparations should be made from the overflow effect of being adjacent to a homeless shelter and what triggers and damage they do, just like cancer. And that's what happened to me, because you came to my house, heard my story, that 4 years, the cancer has killed me, business-wise, family-wise, spiritually, economically. And I've brought it to your attention on a land sale that I wasn't fully compensated, and the city still has to make up the money, along with the misleading promise and letter of intent in the negotiations to buy my property. I still want that done. So the problem occurred is in my taxes with the economic harm. We're spending, businessmen in Anchorage, for safety and security reasons. 77% of all businesses have been affected by the homeless, but I couldn't afford my taxes. In the previous year, COVID gave an extension. Well, I thought it was to the second payment, and I ended up being penalized. This year, the same economic harm and interference by the homeless, as you know, the old Native Hospital, Carlick Street, and the Low Barrier Shelter, and the navigation, I couldn't pay my taxes. So I'd like the penalty waived and the interest. So that's what I'm asking for. I could go on, but my time is up, and the summary is I'd like my taxes penalty waived along with pay me the difference that's owed on the purchase of my property. In a remote possibility, Felix, being consistent, do you
Thank
have
you.
any questions?
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Thank you, Mr. Oliva. I don't see any other members of the public here. Are there any members of the public on the phone that you see? No? Okay. Then with that, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.